There is a good chance you have held this bottle before. The green glass, the gold lettering, the name almost everyone recognises. Jameson is the most poured Irish whiskey on the planet. The bottle behind 1 million shots and even more whiskey gingers. It is the safe order, the one your friend swears by without ever quite explaining why. But here is what almost nobody who drinks it can tell you. What Jameson really is, how it earns that famous smoothness, and which bottle in the lineup you keep walking past. So before you pour another, let us fix that. Number 11. What Jameson actually is. Let us clear up the biggest misunderstanding first. Jameson is not a single malt, and it is not a single anything. It is a blended Irish whiskey, which means it is built from two completely different kinds of whiskey, married together by a blender. The first is pot still whiskey, made from a mix of malted and unmalted barley and distilled in big copper pot stills. This is the part that gives Jameson its body, its spice, and that slightly creamy texture across the tongue. The second is grain whiskey, which is lighter, softer, and distilled in tall column stills. On its own, grain whiskey can taste a little thin and neutral, but blend the two together in the right proportion and you get something balanced, approachable, and easy to drink without thinking too hard about it. That word, blended, scares some people off. There is a snobbery in whiskey circles that treats blends as the cheap seats and single malts as the only serious choice. Ignore it. A good blend is a craft of its own, arguably a harder one, because the blender has to hit the exact same target flavour every single time using ingredients that are never identical. Jameson has spent over 2 centuries getting that ratio right. The reason it tastes the way it does, batch after batch, bottle after bottle, year after year, is that the blending is the whole point. It is not an accident of mass production, it is the recipe. And it is the reason a bar in Tokyo and a bar in Chicago pour the exact same experience. One more number worth sitting with. Jameson sells around 10 million cases a year and accounts for the lion's share of all Irish whiskey sold worldwide. When you drink it, you are not drinking a niche product. You are drinking the single bottle that dragged an entire national category back from the dead. More on that in a second. Number 10. The story behind the name. The man on the label was real, and his story is stranger than you would guess. John Jameson was Scottish, not Irish, a businessman who moved to Dublin and set up a distillery on Bow Street in 1780. A Scotsman founding what would become the most famous Irish whiskey on earth. Read that again. He built it well. For most of the 1800s, Bow Street was one of the largest distilleries in the world, and Irish whiskey, not Scotch, was the whiskey the world actually wanted. Dublin was a global whiskey capital, and the Jameson name sat near the top of it. The family business grew across generations, employing hundreds of workers and shipping its whiskey around the world. Then came a brutal stretch that nearly ended everything. The Easter Rising, the fight for Irish independence, a trade war with Britain that locked Irish whiskey out of huge export markets, and then Prohibition in the United States, which slammed the door on the biggest market of all. Irish whiskey went from world leader to near extinction. By the middle of the 20th century, the dozens of distilleries that once dotted the country had collapsed down to a tiny handful. The survivors, including Jameson, eventually had to merge together into a single group just to stay alive. That survival is why Jameson left Dublin. Production was consolidated and moved to the Middleton Distillery in County Cork, which today is the biggest whiskey distillery in Ireland and makes not just Jameson, but a whole family of Irish whiskies you may already know. The original Bow Street site still stands in Dublin, but it is now a museum and a tour rather than a working still. So when someone confidently tells you Jameson is made in Dublin, you get to gently correct them. It is made in Cork. The Dublin part is the history, not the address. Number 9. Why it tastes so smooth. If Jameson has one signature, it is smoothness. And that smoothness is not a marketing word. It comes from a specific choice John Jameson made, and the distillery has stuck to it ever since. 3 passes through the still. Here is the simple version. Most Scotch malt whiskey is distilled twice. Jameson runs its whiskey through the stills 3 times. Each pass strips out more of the heavy, oily, harsh compounds and leaves behind a lighter, cleaner, more refined spirit. That is the difference you taste when a new drinker says Scotch burns. But Jameson goes down easy. It is not weaker in alcohol. It has simply been through the still one more time, and that extra step sands down the rough edges before the whiskey ever touches a barrel. After distillation comes the wood. Irish law requires a minimum of 3 years of aging in oak casks before a spirit can even legally be called Irish whiskey, and Jameson ages its core whiskey beyond that minimum. Most of it rests in old bourbon barrels brought over from America, with a portion in sherry casks from Spain, and those 2 woods do most of the flavouring work. Bourbon casks hand over vanilla, soft spice, and a honeyed sweetness. Sherry casks bring dried fruit, nuttiness, and a darker richness. The blend of those cask influences is as important as the blend of the whiskies themselves. There is even a sense of place baked in. Much of the barley is grown locally, a good deal of it within roughly 50 miles of the distillery, working with local farmers. So despite operating at a genuinely global scale, the raw material starts close to home. The smoothness then is really 3 things stacked together. Triple distillation, patient aging in good wood, and a blend tuned over generations. None of it is flashy. All of it works, and once you can name the 3 reasons, you will taste them. Number 8. Jameson Original. This is the green bottle, the one that started it all, and it is exactly where any beginner should begin. It costs around $28 to $30, is bottled at 40%, and is engineered to be the most approachable whiskey on the shelf. Pour it and you get gentle vanilla, a little nuttiness, a soft floral note, mild spice, and a touch of sweet sherry underneath. Nothing leaps out of the glass and grabs you by the collar, and that restraint is completely by design. Original is not built to impress a whiskey nerd at a tasting. It is built to be the bottle you can hand to anyone, mix into anything, and sip without needing to make a speech about it. Here is the honest take. As a pure sipping whiskey, Original is fine. Pleasant, clean, a little simple, and that is not an insult. Where it truly earns its place is as a workhorse. In a whiskey ginger, in a Jameson and lime over ice, in any cocktail that needs a smooth base without a loud personality fighting the other ingredients. Original is genuinely hard to beat for the money. Think of it as your everyday bottle, the one you never feel precious about, the one that lives on the counter rather than locked in a cabinet. And yes, this is the bottle that built the shot culture. A cold pour of Jameson is a rite of passage in 1,000 bars. There is nothing wrong with that. But if shots are the only way you have ever met this whiskey, you have barely been introduced. If you are brand new and want a single bottle that does everything competently, start here. The entire rest of the range is just the story of what happens when you decide you want a little more. Number 7. Jameson Black Barrel. If Original is the starting line, Black Barrel is the first real upgrade. And for a lot of drinkers, it is the exact bottle that makes Jameson finally click. Around $35, that small step up in price buys a noticeably bigger experience in the glass. 2 things make it different. First, Black Barrel uses a much higher proportion of pot still whiskey in the blend, which means more of that rich, spicy, full-bodied character and far less of the light, quiet grain. Second, and this is where the name comes from, the barrels are double charred. The insides of the casks are burned a second time, deeper and harder than usual, which cracks open the wood and pulls more caramel, toffee, and toasted oak into the spirit as it ages. The result is a glass that actually rewards slowing down. You get butterscotch, vanilla, a warm baking spice note, a hint of dark fruit, and a finish that lingers on the tongue instead of disappearing the moment you swallow. It is still unmistakably Jameson, still smooth, but with the volume turned up and the colours deepened. This is the bottle to reach for when you want to sip rather than mix, or when you want a cocktail like an old-fashioned or a whiskey sour to taste like it cost twice what it did. For most newcomers, the jump from original to Black Barrel is the single most rewarding few dollars they will ever spend inside this lineup. If you only ever own one Jameson and you want it to punch above the green bottle, this is the one. Number 6, the Caskmates editions. This is where Jameson gets playful and the origin story is genuinely charming. A Jameson whiskey maker got talking to a local craft brewer over a few drinks. The two of them swapped barrels for fun, and the result was Caskmates. Whiskey finished in casks that previously held beer. There are two main versions you will run into. Caskmates Stout Edition is finished in barrels that held Irish Stout, and it picks up exactly what you would hope for. It brings coffee, cocoa, dark chocolate, and a roasted richness layered over the familiar Jameson base. It is the more popular of the two and an easy crowd pleaser, especially for anyone who already loves a pint of the dark stuff. Caskmates IPA edition goes the opposite direction, finished in barrels that held India Pale Ale, which brings hoppy, citrusy, slightly herbal and floral notes to the glass. It is brighter, a touch more divisive, and well worth trying if the stout version feels too heavy for your taste. Both sit right around the price of original, usually under $30, which makes them a low-risk way to taste how dramatically a single barrel can reshape a whiskey. Here is the smartest beginner move in this whole video. Buy a bottle of original and one Caskmates, pour them side by side in 2 glasses, and taste them back to back. The base whiskey is nearly the same. Everything different in the Caskmates glass came from the wood. You will learn more about what cask finishing actually does in 5 honest minutes than any article could teach you, and you will start to understand why whiskey people obsess over barrels in the first place. Now let us get into the bottles hardly anyone ever reaches for, starting with the one I think is the smartest buy on the shelf. Number 5, Jameson Crested. This is the bottle hiding in plain sight. Crested is the one most casual drinkers walk straight past on the way to the green bottle, and it might quietly be the smartest buy in the entire core range. Around $34, and it used to be called Crested 10 before a rebrand dropped the number from the label. What makes Crested special is the recipe. It carries a high proportion of pot still whiskey, much like Black Barrel, but instead of leaning on a heavy char, it leans hard into sherry casks. That sherry influence brings dried fruit, raisin, warm spice, and a deeper, rounder, more old-fashioned sweetness than anything in the original or Caskmates world. It tastes traditional, old-school Irish, like something your grandfather might have poured on a Sunday if your grandfather happened to have very good taste. The reason it gets overlooked is almost funny. There is no flashy gimmick to put on the front of the box. No beer barrels, no double char in the name, no big celebrity campaign behind it. It just quietly does the thing, and it does it well enough to have collected gold medals at serious international competitions several years running. If you have already tried original and Black Barrel and you want to taste a different, more sherried, more mature side of Jameson without spending real money, Crested is the answer. Consider this your tip from someone who has done the walking down the aisle so you do not have to. If you are getting value out of this so far, do me one quick favor. Comment down below where you are watching from and what your favorite drink is. I go through the comments and it genuinely helps the channel reach more people who care about what is in their glass. Now let us climb to the top of the range. Number 4, Jameson Single Pot. Remember how I explained that Jameson is pot still whiskey blended with lighter grain whiskey? This is the bottle where they pull the grain out entirely and let the pot still stand completely on its own. For something close to 240 years, Jameson did not sell a pure pot still whiskey under its own name. This release, which only arrived recently, finally changed that, and for a curious beginner, it is one of the most educational pours in the whole lineup. Single pot still is a style unique to Ireland, made from a mash of both malted and unmalted barley, and distilled in those big copper pot stills. Strip away the soft grain whiskey and the character comes through much louder. You get more spice, more weight, a thicker and almost oily texture, and a flavour that leans into dark chocolate, spicy toffee, cinnamon, fresh ginger, and a twist of orange peel. It is matured in a combination of 5 different cask types, and it is bottled at 46% without chill filtering and at natural colour, which are real quality markers worth learning to spot on a label. Expect to pay somewhere around $50 to $70 depending on your market, which slots it neatly between Crested and the 18-year-old. Here is why it matters for you specifically. Pour a glass of this next to a glass of original and taste them back to back, and you will finally understand, in plain and obvious terms, exactly what the pot, still half of the blend, brings to the table. It is the single best way to taste what makes Irish whiskey Irish. The award judges agree, since it has been collecting gold medals at serious competitions since the day it launched. Number 3. Jameson 18. At the top of the regular lineup sits Jameson 18, and this is the special occasion bottle, the one you buy for a milestone instead of a Tuesday night. Expect to pay around $150, and expect a genuinely different level of whiskey in return. The number is the headline. This is a blend aged for a full 18 years in a combination of bourbon and sherry casks, then given a final finishing period in fresh first fill bourbon barrels to wake the flavors back up before bottling. The current release comes in at 46%, noticeably higher than the 40% that fills the rest of the range, and that extra strength gives it more weight, more grip, and more intensity in the glass. You get layered toffee, fudge, rich vanilla cream, a gentle sherried nuttiness, soft toasted oak, and a long, mellow, complex finish that the cheaper bottles simply cannot reach no matter how good they are at their own price. So is it worth $150? That honestly depends on what you want from it. As a pure value play, there are Irish whiskies around this price that deliver more drama and more punch for the money, and a serious bargain hunter might point you elsewhere. But that misses what 18 actually is. It is the polished, refined, grown-up version of the exact profile you first fell for at the green bottle level. It is the proof that the Jameson House style can scale all the way up the ladder without losing its identity. When you want to celebrate something and drink something that tastes unmistakably like Jameson at its most elegant, this is the bottle. There is also an even rarer version called Bow Street 18, bottled at full cask strength and given its final finish back at the original Dublin distillery, which sits right at the very top of the Jameson pyramid for collectors. For the rest of us, the standard 18 is the real destination. Just promise me one thing. When you open it, drink it slowly and neat. Dumping this into a cocktail would be a small crime against the 18 years it spent in the barrel. Number 2. The flavoured bottles and the gift shop stuff. You have seen them. Jameson Orange, Jameson Cold Brew, the triple gift set that shows up stacked by the register around the holidays. A beginner deserves to know exactly what these are before spending a single dollar on them. The Orange and Cold Brew bottles are flavoured products, not straight whiskey. Orange is sweetened and dosed with citrus flavour. Cold Brew is built around coffee. They are designed for fast, easy mixing at parties, and judged purely on those terms they do their job. But understand clearly what you are buying. You are buying a flavoured spirit, something far closer to a ready-made cocktail base than to the whiskey we have spent this whole video talking about. If your goal is to learn what real Irish whiskey tastes like, these will teach you nothing. If your goal is just something sweet and uncomplicated for a casual night with friends, that is a different and perfectly valid reason to grab one. Just walk in with your eyes open and do not mistake it for the real lesson. Triple and the various travel, retail and gift editions are mostly variations on the core house style, with slightly different cask treatments and fancier packaging. There's nothing wrong with any of them as a gift, and the boxes look great under a tree. Just know that the real education in this brand lives in Original, Black Barrel, Crested, and 18. It does not live in the seasonal display by the checkout, no matter how nice the box is. Number 1. How to actually drink it. Let us finish with the part that matters most, because owning the right bottle means nothing if you serve it wrong. The good news is that Jameson is one of the most forgiving whiskies on earth, so you genuinely cannot ruin this. Neat is the purest way. Just whiskey in a glass at room temperature, no ice, no mixer. It is the best way to actually taste what you paid for, especially with Crested, Black Barrel, or 18. If the alcohol feels a touch sharp on the first sip, add a few drops of water. Not a splash, just a few drops off your fingertip or a spoon. Water opens the whiskey up and softens the bite, and even the most serious drinkers in the world do it without shame. On the rocks, poured over a single large ice cube rather than a handful of small ones, chills and mellows the whiskey while melting slowly. That approach suits Original and Black Barrel beautifully on a warm evening. Then there are the mixes that made the brand famous in the first place. The whiskey ginger, equal parts Jameson and ginger ale over ice with a fat wedge of lime squeezed in, is the most reliable, easy drink in the world, and the reason half of you know the name at all. An old-fashioned built on Black Barrel, just whiskey, a little sugar and bitters, is a small revelation for the money. When the weather turns cold, a proper Irish coffee made with hot black coffee, a measure of Jameson, a spoon of sugar, and a float of lightly whipped cream poured over the back of a spoon is one of the great drinks on the planet. The rule is simple. Match the bottle to the moment, mix the cheaper ones freely and without guilt, sip the older ones slowly and neat, and you will never once go wrong. So that is Jameson, the whole story, from the green bottle in every bar on earth to the 18-year-old you save for something worth celebrating. You now know more about what is in that glass than nearly everyone who orders it, where it comes from, how it is made, and exactly which bottle to reach for next. If this guide earned itself a spot on your shelf, hit subscribe and stick around, because next we are settling the oldest argument in Irish whiskey. Jameson against Bushmills, the two giants of the category, and the answer is a lot closer than either side wants to admit.